Welcome to the Alchemy Consulting Group Podcast. Join Arquella Hargrove, Alchemy's Chief Culture Officer, for impactful conversations with business leaders and experts who are committed to transforming their work cultures and creating inclusive work environments. Let's learn, develop, and garner best practices together. Enjoy this episode.
Welcome to the Alchemy Consulting Group Podcast, where we distill conversations with thought leaders to bring you transformative insights and strategies. Our mission is to revolutionize organizational cultures, one business at a time. So join us as we explore vital topics that empower leaders, galvanize teams, and reshape the world of work. Let the alchemy begin. And we have the fabulous Miriam Lopez. I'm a fan of Miriam, y'all. I promote Miriam and let's get Miriam on the project. And clients love Miriam, right? We had one client that actually named the leadership program after Miriam. Like, that's Miriam's program.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like, that's not the actual name of it, but we're going to go with that because we know Miriam's wonderful. So we have Miriam today. So Miriam, if you can introduce yourself to our fabulous listeners.
Well, and actually, Arquella, before Miriam jumps in, I just wanted to say, I love how you kick off the podcast. It's like you are just so into this. This is such your project, and you really mean what you say about the podcast and your work through Alchemy. And I do agree, Miriam, it is so exciting to have you on. Wherever you go, you bring and leave greatness. So our listeners are truly in for a treat with a few minutes with you today. So Arquella, you were saying, let's have Miriam introduce herself. So we'll pick up there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, thank you so much. I am surrounded by greatness. I think part of this community is elevating the game, right? I mean, we all got here because we're great at something, but how do we get to the next level? And how do we do it in community? And so I am Miriam Lopez, and I'm the youngest of 5 kids born in Mexico City. And I kind of like to reinvent myself every 10 years. So the first 10, 15 years of my career, I spent in operations in contact centers, developing global teams, running operations for contact centers. And so there I really learned about businesses, how they run, how they operate, strategy, people, numbers, metrics, which I'm very passionate about. And then the next 10 years, I moved into human resources with an angle in talent acquisition. And all of this experience I harnessed, and about 5 years ago, I started with the group doing consulting, and it has been fascinating. So, I bring deep experience in business, in transformation, in human development, and also human resources experience in that. So that's a little bit about me. I live in Houston, and I live with my 3 rescue dogs that I love very much, and only a few minutes from my parents. And actually all of the 5 siblings and my parents, we all live probably within a 5-mile radius. So family is very important to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Have your family close. There's no price that you can put on that. That's very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Miriam. Yes, I love how that family first, and just how you give of yourself and your heart and just this important work, and so how you're making the impact in the world. So I definitely appreciate you and what you bring right to the community. One of the we're talking all things leadership here, so the essential skills for today's leaders, and I was participated this past weekend in a leadership retreat, and just things that resonated is that, it's hard to be a leader, and sometimes it's lonely to be a leader as well. But really the key is that it's all in how do we show up to be that great leader. And so, Miriam, really want you to share with our audience, what are the biggest challenges that leaders of today are facing? And what challenges do you even see on the horizon that our leaders need to be aware of and start to prepare?
I think as leaders and having to work with people all these years, the number one thing is leaders leading themselves, right? We oftentimes think about the scope of leading others, leading organizations, delivering outcomes. But before we can do all of that, how do we lead ourselves? So are we
Mm-hmm.
constantly expanding our awareness? What are our patterns of behavior that got us here? And are those things, ideas, thoughts still serving us? And how often do we take time to reflect and say, okay, how are my leadership skills for me? What kind of self-talk do I have in my hand? Am I a compassionate leader within? Do I have empathy for me from within? How do I beat myself up, and do I go into shame when I fail at doing something? So I think the first thing is leaders have to lead themselves and expand the awareness and make change. The second thing I think that leaders are faced with now is definitely, we know the pandemic changed the world, the way we work. Some of us are working more remotely, and I think it could feel lonely at times. Like you mentioned, Arquella, leading can often feel lonely. So how do we engage in community so that we feel connected, and not only connected with others, but connected within ourselves? What really makes us content, and be able to stretch the ability to create contentment for ourselves. And I would say the third thing is, as leaders, is how do we continue to work and evolve with different generations in the workplace? So we know that work has become very dynamic, from having to use the technology, the tools, the cameras, the sound, the lighting, the microphone, can you hear me, you're on mute, etc., to working with Gen Zs, millennials, and other generations that are currently in the workplace. And not only are some of us not in the office, or we're hybrid, but we have different channels of communication. So think about all of that put in a blender and somebody turning it on, and now we have to figure it out. So I would say those are the main pressing problems that I hear facing organizations. But if you can learn to lead yourself, it will really be easy to, it's like, what do you get when you squeeze an orange, right? You get orange juice. So when we're squeezed as leaders, we get what's inside of us. We get how we lead ourselves. And the more we can work on that, or on expanding our awareness and on learning communication with the generations, I think the more effective we'll be.
I love that visualization that you paint. Like, when you squeeze us as leaders, the juice that comes out is really, what's inside of us. And as you were describing that, though, a little bit, Miriam, a few moments ago, you used the word shame. And language is very important. Can you describe to our listeners what shame is and what shame is not?
Sure. So, because I am trained and Dare to Lead, I'll use Brene Brown's definition. And what Brene says shame is not I did something bad, is I am bad. So in order for us to expand shame, there's a little bit of judgment and secrecy, and that expands, right? So where's the judgment come from? Often from within ourselves. Where's the secrecy? Well, there it is. It's part of shame, right? So what is not shame is the awareness of, how did I do today? Well, I did these 3 things that created value, and I said I was going to do these 2 things, and I didn't do them, and I didn't even get back to that person. Let me go ahead and make that better and clean it up, right? That restores our word, and it restores who we are. So it's more of like, oh, I did this, well, I didn't do it, but there's no judgment. There's a desire to do better and to grow. So I would say that's the distinction between wanting to pursue excellence and be better than shame and perfectionism, which both of those are very destructive.
So true, so true. And it goes down to just being, as leaders, how do we be more accountable, right, to ourselves, to our teams, to our organizations at the end of the day. And definitely, I love when you were talking about, again, that it starts with the leader, that self-awareness and being self-aware. And a lot of times in our experiences or training experiences, it's always starting with that leader and having that self-awareness. And then from there, that takes care of everything else, hopefully, right? Especially with the communication with the 5 generations, right, that are in the workplace. And then being in this hybrid era, for sure, we get a lot of those requests, like, how do I have these conversations, right, with the different generation? Or, how do I navigate, right, being in this hybrid era? So definitely there's a need, right, for our leaders to continue to keep that top of mind, but then making sure that they're equipping themselves, right, with those tools, right, to be even better, right, for themselves and for their teams, for sure. Miriam, if you can just share just, what skills, right, when you think about, and again, you really spoke to it clearly around awareness and being able to communicate across those different generations and being able to navigate within this hybrid era, as I mentioned. But what other skills do tomorrow's impactful leaders need in order to start to cultivate today? What are some practical, right? And we know leaders need what's the how to it, right? How do I do that? How do I have those conversations? But what are some of those skills that you would share with leaders on what they can do today?
Yeah, I think a superpower that leaders really need to encompass in themselves is adaptability. Being able to adapt and not be so stuck in our ways. We oftentimes spend a lot of energy resisting what is, right? And when we do that, what we focus on and what we resist only persists and it expands. So it's very easy. We're hardwired to look for, we have a negativity bias. So we often scan, say, is this safe? Is this not safe? And it's so easy to make people wrong and to resist that. But if we are able to adapt and we're more flexible, and we take that and look at within, what we'll realize is that we're a set of patterns. We're changing beings every single day. So the way that I define my identity, or you, both of you define your identities, is just the way you define yourselves now. But if one part of you is not working and you're adaptable, then you can change that. And so it's a different paradigm shift, is to say, okay, well, this is how I am, and, I'm Latina, so I am loud. Well, okay, if that doesn't serve me anymore, then I can say, well, do I really need to be loud? Can I have more of a quiet voice? Tell me, where is that coming from? So oftentimes we misbelieve that our identity is the way we're set. And that's not what it is. It's just a set of beliefs, coping mechanisms, patterns that we have all put in the soup, and that makes the flavor of who we are today. But if we no longer like that soup and we now want a bisque or we want something different, then we can say, okay, well, I need to change the ingredients in that recipe, and I need to be retrospective, and I need to learn, and I need to be adaptable. And what are some classes, resources, things that I can take on and change that? So you could literally reinvent yourself from the inside out. And that's part, again, going back to leading yourself and being adaptable. So adaptability, superpower.
Adaptability. Okay. Yeah. And
Love it.
I've had the privilege of working alongside you and learning from you. And one of the things, like you were talking about style and just how you show up, but one thing that you've taught me, and I don't even know that, I picked up on this, is when you're engaging with clients and they have questions or they're unsure, you assure them that you are an expert. I mean, you verbalize, I am an expert in this, right? I mean, and you don't do it in a way that's bodacious or over the top. It just comes across as this quiet confidence where you let the client know you've got this. And I've started to implement that too. So I just wanted to say, I add that to what you're sharing, because sometimes part of being a leader is just reminding everyone that you are a leader, you are an expert, you earn the right to have the seat at the table, to be on the Zoom call, to give the advice, but they just need to hear you say it. So I just want to thank you for doing that. But then I want to pivot, because there's also a concept that you've brought to my attention and I've learned from you, and that's the concept of generous listening. And when we talk about leadership, you oftentimes are talking through the thematic of generous listening and how that can really change the landscape, the ecoscape of a leader's trajectory and what they're trying to drive. Can you tell us what generous listening is and how we cultivate that skill?
Yes. So oftentimes the way we're wired is we listen to respond. We listen to make wrong. We overtalk people. We do all of these things in our head. Or guess what? We're not even listening to each other. I'm listening to the voice in my head saying, oh, I'm hungry. I should have had that breakfast. or wonder what time this is going to be done, or do I look cute? Oh, I'm wondering if I missed the memo on wearing white, because I'm the only one that wears white. So like, and as soon as I'm in that dialogue of listening intently within my head, I immediately disconnect from the two of you, and I disconnect from the present moment. So not being a generous listener is robbing ourselves of the now. What generous listening is an intentional act, is a commitment, is a practice, is a decision that I am going to be here, and I am not going to multitask. I'm not going to pretend listening. I'm not going to make you wrong. I'm really going to, number one, make a decision. I'm fully present. Number two, I'm going to hear this conversation from their point of view, from their world, without judgment. And number three, I'm going to get the emotion. I'm going to really land. It's going to land over here, what they're saying. And I'm going to make sure the last one is that they know that I got them, that I hear what they're saying. And so when we practice generous listening, we, number one, connect with others at a much deeper level. So if you can do that, then you have more influence to change, to transform. Number two, people feel less lonely because it's like, oh, Miriam understands me, Arquella understands me, Yvonne gets me, right? So it builds stronger communities. And number three, we're able to be in here and now because we don't know when our last day will be. And the past is already the past. So why not be fully present? If you're washing the dishes, if you're in a meeting, be there. Be fully there with all of your senses, with your heart, with your brain, because that's part of contributing your talents and your time and your treasure. And if you're not doing that, then you're stealing. As simple as that.
Arquella, is your shirt white?
No, it's like a tan or beige like. Yeah.
It wasn't showing up.
Miriam's getting that conversation she's having with herself.
Right? Don't we all do it? Don't we all do it all the time?
Yeah. We have those conversations and tell ourselves stories all day, every day, right? Which can definitely impact our listening. So I was like, Miriam's talking my love language, right? Listening, communication, right? And how to be a better listener, right? We all have been, blessed with hearing, but listening is a different skill set and practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was even powerful, Arquella. Yes, we all hear, but listening and then generous listening, those are different steps on the spectrum. So thank you for bringing that point home.
Yeah, thank you, Miriam. You got to practice it. You got to make the decision to show up and be present and that no judgment. But yeah, we gotta put the conversations and the stories. We gotta bring them under control. As I say, that mindless chatter happening, right? So
yes,
yeah, it's key for sure. Awesome, thank you. That was great. But yeah, we can talk about listening all day, right? It's a whole session in itself. For sure. But Miriam, let's, when you think about just what you've shared, and again, those skill sets for leaders, and again, just really honing in on the generous listening, let's really kind of think about what are some areas for today's leaders to watch out for, right? Or what can cause a leader to fall flat. So what might be some recommendations from you, right? For leaders to, hey, be on the watch out for these areas to ensure that they do not fall flat as leaders.
Yeah, I'm going to link that back to what Yvonne said. You're right. Many leaders say, oh, I feel like an imposter, and they experience the imposter syndrome, or they lack confidence. Well, listen, most of us, there are areas that we don't know anything about, but that doesn't mean that, we have to beat ourselves up or not have the confidence. So I would say, leaders, watch out for not having that confidence within your ability to lead yourself and lead others. Be confident because you have talents. You have something to contribute. You can create value everywhere you go, just as you are. I would say the second thing is to be able to have courage. I think oftentimes we want to be pleased. So when we have to coach someone, or we have to speak up in the meeting and say, hey, is this really a good idea? Have we explore other options? We shrink, right? And we oftentimes don't have the courage to speak up and to contribute. And by doing that, we don't really add to the organization and the diversity of thought. You might be onto something that you need to say it. And that comes with confidence, courage. And I would say the third thing is the commitment to be a lifelong learner. I think things that we don't know can be scary, right? Now I'm really learning a lot about artificial intelligence and tools. And I feel it's like, oh, it's so fascinating. Like, I have a passion for data because I want to know that the work that we do together in developing leaders, that there's actual data that supports that we're making change and that we're building better work cultures and organizations. So, I could feel very intimidated by AI and say, well, I'm old, I don't want to learn, but be curious. I think those are things that you got to watch out for. If you're giving yourself that chatter that shrinks you, stop it. Just don't do that. Do the opposite. Say that you're confident. And just why? Because you say so. Because you bring value to the world. Because it's only one of you. Number two, have courage. Come from your heart. Courage, the word courage comes from cur, which means heart. And be able to speak up with your ideas, with questions in a way that brings people together. And be open and be a lifelong learner. I would say take a percentage of what you make every year and reinvest that in your own development. Get a coach, get a class, sign up. If you're thinking about, well, should I spend those $2,000 on this? Do it. It's going to pay tenfold. Everything that you invest in yourself, in your team, in your organization is going to give you dividends. If not, I think what we do is we become irrelevant. If we don't continuously upgrade our system, just like our computers that we need to upgrade, our homes, our air conditionings, our cars, this is the same thing. We're no different than that. And we need to constantly be upgrading ourselves, our ideas, our beliefs, and seeing, is this still working for me? And is this an area that I need to take on?
Miriam, take that investment topic up to the macro level. Let's say I'm investing in myself personally, but what do organizations need to be doing? I mean, there are budgets every year, right? It used to be training and development, but now there's really focus on leadership development. What are those smart investments that organizations can make in leadership development?
Yeah, see, oftentimes organizations invest in just fixing the problems. So it would be the equivalent of I'm going to eat junk food every single day. I'm never going to move. I'm going to be sedentary. And then I'll just save up my money until I get really sick. Well, I mean, that's one way of doing it, right? But what if we start incorporating healthy habits, eating, walking, moving, sleeping, etc., so that we may never have to get sick? And I use that as an analogy that organizations oftentimes say, okay, well, I really need somebody because our turnover is so badly. We have a toxic culture. And so now you're just putting out fires. And I'm not saying don't do it, start. But I think the shift could be in organizations need to say, where are we going to be in 10, 20, 30 years? Do we have succession planning? Do our leaders, are they cutting edge? Do we have the best culture in the organization? When we roll out surveys, do our employees, are they like fanatics of our organization, raving fans, or are they detractors? And really start your leadership development plans from the highest level. What would be the key skill that would take us 10 times? What is it that would make us cutting edge? What is it that would make us leaders within our industry? And I tell you, yeah, some of that is going to be technology. But the thing that you as a business owner, as a leader, will take you to the next level are your people. And if you know that, then why not invest in them? Not only to put out fires, not only to fix what's broken, but to create a strategy of 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, and say, this is where we're going to be. This is how the world is going to evolve. So I'm going to create a budget. And be generous with your budget. I think that if you're spending just the leftover, you got it all wrong. You got to really spend a significant amount of your revenue with hiring talent and developing them. Because if you're hiring them but not developing them, then you're not maximizing your investment, right? It would be for me to buy a mansion in Beverly Hills 50 years ago, but never upkeep it or anything like that. Well, yeah, I have a mansion in Beverly Hills. But guess what? The air conditioning doesn't work. It doesn't even have air conditioning. The weeds are growing. Like, so what? And it's the same thing with your people, right? These analogies, y'all, they're just coming out.
No, they're wonderful. They're wonderful for sure. And just on point, right? And so, yeah, I'm a big believer, right, that we have to not only develop ourselves, but develop our teams. My coach tells me, like, you have extra money, right? Team and marketing, right, are the keys. So again, we have to be able to develop ourselves as leaders in our teams. And again, just know the investment will come back for sure, right? As I tell business owners, right? As a business owner, I'm gonna bet on myself and my team every day, all day, right? And so I do that through investment for sure, because again, it's gonna come back for sure. So thank you, Miriam. Those are great. Just key points, again, not only for business owners, but for leaders, especially those who hold the purse string, right, to be able to know, again, investing in our talent. Even when there's a downturn in the economy, a lot of times, and people want to cut leadership development, is like, no, that's the key time you need to be developing your people, right? So, right. And so keep it going for sure, because we see the outcomes of success, right, when we're able to do that for sure. So thank you. Great conversation. Yvonne, anything you want to add there?
No, these were definitely some great nuggets. Every time I leave a conversation with Miriam, I'm just better than when the conversation started. So thank you, Miriam, for sharing your gift, not only with Arquella and me, but with the listeners as well. We appreciate you.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any final remarks advice you want to share with the audience, Miriam, before we do close it out for this time?
Just so much appreciation for both of you. And if you're listening today, just really, take one or two areas that you're grateful for yourself. If I am able to sit at this table with these wonderful leaders and you're listening, it's because I've had my own journey, right? I joke that I had a PhD in suffering. So I can tell you that who you are now, if it's not working, you can change it. Take it on. Look for help. Connect with communities. You're not alone. You're supported. Thank you.
Well said. Well, that wraps up our dialogue here at Alchemy Consulting Group Podcast. And thank you to Miriam. Thank you for everyone tuning in and engaging with us on this journey towards enriching organizational cultures and leadership. And remember, each conversation is a step towards transformation. Continue to lead, innovate, and thrive until we connect again. Thank you all.
Thank you for tuning in to the Alchemy Consulting Group podcast. Follow this podcast on social media and help continue the conversation by sharing your business and leadership best practices. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you consume yours and share this podcast with your organizations and networks. Let's strengthen the community of those committed to responsible leadership and work environments where everyone can thrive.